The 2021 F1 season joined the argument debating the title of greatest ever, but with such a shake-up of the rules for 2022, how might the land of Formula 1 look moving forwards? There are many questions, simply about the new car designs, and whether they'll improve the racing between the cars or not. And while many driver pairings remain largely the same, George Russell has graduated to Mercedes after 3 seasons at Williams. So how will he fare alongside 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton? Will El Plan come to fruition for Fernando? How competitive will Haas really be this season? And can Max Verstappen defend his world title? Hello everyone and welcome to the 5 Red Lights podcast. My name is Aaron and today I'm going to dive in to some predictions for the 2022 Formula 1 season. So let's kick off with my first prediction, which is there will be a minimum of 3 maiden Grand Prix winners in 2022. Now, you usually find that there are some first-time winners with a shake-up of regulations, and of course, we saw that back in 2009 when the regulations pretty drastically changed, and Mark Webber took his maiden pole position and victory at the Nürburgring. Of course, last year we had Esteban Ocon claim his maiden Formula 1 win in Hungary, capitalising on the mayhem at the start and the bizarre restart circumstances to hold off Sebastian Vettel. Lando Norris also came close to his first victory later on in the season in Russia after taking his first pole position the day before. But with the new rules in 2022, hopefully there will be opportunities for 3 drivers, at least in particular, to take the top step for the first time on race day. So the obvious one, which we'll start with, is George Russell. Joining Mercedes, he was so cruelly denied in Sakir when he deputised for Lewis Hamilton in 2020 when the champ had COVID. There was the tyre mix-up and then the late puncture, and eventually Sergio Perez would go on to take his maiden victory on that night. George last season took that stunning podium in Spa after quite an incredible qualifying lap, although how you define that as a race and an actual podium is up for debate. But the record books show that George has a podium, so you cannot deny that he had earned it. Now, I'm pretty sure that George will win in 2022, but I don't think he's going to be the only British driver to be standing on top of the podium this year. The next one is going to be Lando Norris, not necessarily in this order, and of course we fully expect Lewis Hamilton to win as well. So Lando, Russia was super painful for him. It was painful for everybody because Lando's such a likeable guy. I just can't see how you dislike Lando Norris. He's so fun, energetic, and he's positive pretty much all the time. Russia was as painful for him as Sakir was for George, and also as Bahrain 2019 was for Charles Leclerc. But it will have only made him stronger. And George Russell has gone on record speaking about how the Sakir experience has strengthened him and been a good learning experience for him. Luck pretty much deserted Lando in the final third of 2021, but if he continues to perform at the level that he produced through most of 2021 into this year with a good solid McLaren car, that victory is just a matter of time away. His performances at some points last season were just absolutely fantastic. It's been a long time since we saw someone not in one of the top 2 or 3 cars really push and be a weekly threat for podiums. Obviously you see someone surprise and jump up on the podium in maybe a crazy race or something, but mostly the podium threat was coming from Mercedes or Red Bull or Ferrari when they were running towards the front a few years ago. But for McLaren to do that with pretty much a midfield level car, sort of somewhere in between the top 2 in Mercedes and Red Bull and then everybody else, while they were battling Ferrari, was pretty impressive. Now, my last pick for maiden Grand Prix winners this year comes from McLaren's old rivals, Ferrari. And of course, that only means one driver, because Charles Leclerc is already a 2-time Grand Prix winner. Lastly, but by no means least on this list, is Carlos Sainz. He actually beat his highly reputable teammate Charles Leclerc to 5th in the Drivers' Championship last season by snatching it with that memorable podium or not so memorable podium because of all the other craziness that was happening in Abu Dhabi. He took 3rd place on the road that evening, and it put him 5th in the championship, best of the rest, which for Carlos is a real coup because, going into the season, was he going to be able to challenge Charles Leclerc? Would he be able to match him for pace on a qualifying lap? I think Charles is still the faster driver over a single lap. But Carlos is just, there's no other way to put it. He's a smooth operator. So to see him deliver that was just excellent. And he'll be hoping to build on that superb first year with Ferrari. Carlos is ready to win and potentially ready for a tilt at the World Championship. And his chances depend so much on Ferrari getting things right in 2022. But like his compatriot Fernando Alonso, also his hero, remember, Carlos strikes me as a man who, given a sniff of victory, will grab it with both hands. Now, you could say that that is wrong because he was in the lead in Russia, but he didn't have the fastest car in Russia. He'd made a great start, catapulted his way into the lead, and the McLaren was simply a faster package on the day, so he was never realistically going to hold on to that position given the power of a DRS move in Sochi. But had it been somewhere else, he may have stood a little bit more of a chance. Carlos is definitely ready to be fighting at the front. It would be brilliant to see Ferrari back up there fighting for race victories because they've got such a likeable driver pairing in Charles and Carlos, whose skills complement each other so well. Charles is that X factor, more of a flamboyant driver, and there's a bit more emotion to it. So you can emotionally invest yourself and empathise with Charles very easily. But with Carlos, there's something stealth-like that I just can't help but admire in him. He's so smooth, so efficient, and no matter where he qualifies, he can in his McLaren days he was qualifying 15th and then rocketing back up the order to 5th on race day. He's just such an efficient driver in terms of picking his moments and working his way through the field. Nothing seems to be too much drama for Carlos, and he just gets the job done. He's just one of those super reliable drivers, and I think if you give him a winning car, he will win with it. Simple as that. Next on my list is something that's pretty much inevitable really when you have a change of rules, and that is that at least one team's car is subject to a protest in Bahrain. We've seen the protests be lodged with increasing regularity over the last 2 or 3 seasons, with Force India protesting Renault back in 2019 and essentially costing them a huge points finish in Suzuka. We saw the DAS system protested in 2020 by Red Bull, which Mercedes had pioneered, and then all through last season there was all sorts of things being protested, from front wings to rear wings to who touched what and who did this, and wow, it was just, people need to get a grip on themselves a little bit, because yes, you're trying to get a competitive advantage, and no, we don't want teams to be flouting the rules of doing things that are slightly underhand, but there also needs to be an element of, right, we need to just accept that the FIA have these rules in place and these tests are there to deal with the cars and make sure everything's legal, and if the FIA say they're legal, then we just have to go on with it. So it's a little bit of both. The FIA need to be really strict on what passes, what doesn't pass, and the teams need to just sort of have a sensible tablet and behave themselves. It only stands to reason that at least one team, though, will have something slightly questionable going on, considering that there is such a drastic rule change for 2022. There's so many different ways they can be interpreted, I would suppose. Would it be too much to suggest that it's actually going to be Christian Horner who's going to be the first to pipe up about another team's car? He's got previous. I mean, a leopard doesn't change its spots, let's be honest. But let's try and temper the protests through this season, chaps. But still, I think someone's going to be under protest in Bahrain, and that will be interesting for sure. Now, talking of protests, I'm sure we'll hear about them all over social media. And if you have a social media account, you can follow me on social media. I am at 5_red_lights on Twitter, 5redlights on Instagram, and I also have a blog page, which is 5redlights.wixsite.com/5rlpod blog. So on there you can read some of the articles that I am writing as I try to become a sports journalist specialising in Formula 1. And you can also jump on the links to every podcast and every video that I upload. So go and follow those as well. And while you're at it, if you're convinced, if I'm doing enough, if you're enjoying these predictions, hit that subscribe button, because that would mean a real amount to me. And that would be super kind of you. Let's move on to number 3 in my list of predictions. Now, this concerns Valtteri Bottas, and no, it's not to do with the amount of espresso he is going to drink. I recently tried one for the first time, and I don't understand why he drinks it. It was disgusting. Gosh, I've never been so convinced to keep drinking tea in my whole life. So I will stick to tea, and Valtteri can stick to his espressos. Now, hopefully his espresso is going to help power his Alfa Romeo back onto the podium, and that would be a return for both Valtteri and for Alfa Romeo. He had a successful period at Mercedes with plenty of podium appearances and all of his victories coming with the Brackley-based team. I'm backing him to draw on his experience and embrace this fresh start with Alfa Sauber, and to actually snatch a podium in 2022. It's going to need a bit of a wild race, but Bottas is a cool customer. He's got the speed. He'll need a little bit of luck, but sometimes luck deserted him while he was at Mercedes, so it'd be only fair that now that he's gone to Alfa Romeo, he gets a bit of a rub of the green and things fall in his direction for a change. Now, my next prediction is a bit bold. It's a little bit out there, but just sort of stick with me, because hopefully I'll be able to convince you that there is some logic to my thinking on this one. My next prediction is that Aston Martin finished below Williams in the Constructors Championship. Now, Aston Martin returned to Formula 1 in 2021. It's safe to say their season was a bit underwhelming. In 2020, as not Force India, as a Racing Point, they'd actually challenged for third in the Constructors and won a race. But they suffered very heavily with the floor regulation tweaks and their low rake philosophy not really delivering as they'd hoped. Otmar Safnauer is out the door and Mike Crack is in as team principal, so it'll be interesting to see how that pans out and where Otmar himself lands in the paddock. Strong links to Alpine, who've also got rid of Martin Budkowski, but Alpine are a little bit all over the place, so I'm not really sure whether Otmar would function too well in that. Now, Williams, by comparison, in 2021, their stock rose really highly, but obviously it's not very difficult to rise highly when your starting position is super low. They scored the same number of podiums as Aston Martin, in fact, in 2021, if you don't include Vettel's disqualification in Hungary. And they generally seem on an upward trajectory. That team is back on a stable financial footing, and they've got a pair of hungry young drivers in Nicholas Latifi and Alex Albon. Whether Alex has the star quality speed on a Saturday that George Russell had to put that car in places it sometimes really did not belong, like, second on the grid in Belgium, which then became a podium. Sometimes you really do just look at things and wonder how they got there, but maybe the answer is just George Russell. Alex has got a lot to live up to in terms of the legacy George has built there over his 3 years, but he's also got a little bit of catching up to do, because a year out of the car and driving DTM will keep him sort of sharp, but there's nothing like a Formula 1 beast. His saving grace, of course, is that it's all new cars. Latifi, really unfairly on the end of some vitriol on social media after Abu Dhabi. Not his fault, it's just one of those things. He crashed. It happens to racing drivers. He'll want to put that behind him and come back and show exactly what he is made of. And I think he is going to be super hungry to build on what was a really positive year for the Canadian. Now, on paper, the Aston Martin combo of Vettel and Stroll looks better, but they lacked consistency in 2021. And there's a lot happening around Aston Martin at the moment with the change of team principal, and they're rebuilding the factory and the wind tunnel, and it's just all... There seems to be too much going on at the moment, because when they were Jordan, Force India, Racing Point, they made a lot out of not very little. At the moment, they're making not very much out of perceivably quite a lot. Lawrence Stroll bankrolling the team, Aston Martin coming on board. It's a big brand, so the spotlight is on that team now like it has never been before. I can see them getting a little bit lost on their path forward, and this is going to open the door for a rising Williams team to scoop at least one extra place in the team standings. Now, you'd have to then wonder what the repercussions would be at Aston Martin should they fail to live up to at least what they think they should be doing, which is at least a midfield. But that's not to say, who knows? Williams could win the World Championship and Aston Martin could be second. And then my prediction is still right. But that would be quite something, to have two major British brands just coming from nowhere really in the pecking order to fight for the World Championship. But it's conceivable that, for me, Aston Martin could get a little bit muddled on their path, especially with the change of team direction in terms of team principal, and there's a little bit of question marks over Sebastian Vettel's future. Will he want to carry on in 2023? What doors might open elsewhere, especially if Aston Martin are not running at the front and there is a certain silver car with an empty cockpit. We'll wait and see. Williams are capable of anything this year. They could become nothing or everything. So everything's on the cards for this one. Let's wait and see how it pans out. I'm quite intrigued by it. What do you think about that one? Now, my fifth and final prediction surrounds Pierre Gasly and his relationship with the Red Bull family. Now, since 2019, the saga of Pierre Gasly returning to Red Bull and their main team has run and run. It's become as much of a will they, won't they as Ross and Rachel from Friends. Now, he was passed over in 2020, and that was because Red Bull hoped that Alex Albon would make the seat his own, but he didn't. So they opted for Sergio Perez, and Perez did enough to keep the seat for this year, 2022. And Pierre Gasly was driving beautifully in 2020 and much of 2021 in the AlphaTauri, which seems to suit his driving style a whole lot more. Pierre has, of course, tasted the winner's champagne at Monza in 2020 in that crazy race, and he will want more. However, I don't think AlphaTauri are the team that are going to be delivering it for him. Rumours of burnt bridges and unwillingness to adapt his approach have swirled since his demotion, and while Helmut Marko has anything to do with it, I don't see a way back into that team for Pierre to partner Max Verstappen at least. So where does he go? Alpine? Maybe. But they've got Oscar Piastri waiting in the wings. Perhaps Lewis really does call it a day and, the door opens at Mercedes, but would Mercedes be able to prize him out of AlphaTauri ahead of the 2022 season if Lewis decides that he's not coming back? Although I think if he wasn't coming back, I think we might have heard about it by now. I doubt that. Maybe 2023 will open the door for Pierre. But George will still be trying to make that team his, and Mercedes would want to possibly try out their Formula E world champion Nick de Vries, or perhaps Stoffel van Dorn gets the nod as he is the reserve driver for Mercedes. Aston Martin and Sebastian Vettel could part ways. Seb could just go into retirement. There's a lot of things he has interests in. He could move on, or he could be the man that replaces Lewis Hamilton should Lewis decide to move on. It could be a sideways step in that respect to Aston Martin, but Lawrence Stroll is determined to get things right with the Silverstone team. And of course, Pierre has to carefully consider his next move, because if he stays at AlphaTauri, he might miss out on a chance to add to that 2020 victory in Italy. It's a big year for Pierre. How long does he wait in this holding pattern, waiting for another chance at Red Bull, who famously don't give second chances? Will they even want to put Alex Albon back in the car alongside Max Verstappen? I think that is just as big a question as Pierre going back in. But Albon is regarded much more highly for his approach and his adaptability within that team, whereas Pierre, it seems, has left a lot to be desired amongst not just the top brass at Red Bull, but perhaps some of the mechanics and the other team members as well. So it's a big year for Pierre. Does he stick or does he twist? Are Red Bull really his lobster? Lobster doesn't work. Is it really his bull? We'll have to wait and see. Now, it wouldn't be a predictions video if I didn't give you who I thought were going to be champion. Now, we're going to do Constructors Champions first, and then I'm going to go on to my Drivers Champion as well. So for Constructors Champions, I've got Mercedes or Ferrari. I'm kind of hedging my bets here because I can't really pick between the two. Mercedes have arguably got the strongest pair on the grid in terms of raw ability in their drivers. They've also got the combination with the most wins, 103, which admittedly are all from Lewis Hamilton, but it would be foolish not to expect George to add wins of his own if the Mercedes proves to be a front-running package, and there's no reason to think that it won't be. All that said, George is untested at the front of the field on a regular basis. He did deliver a spectacular performance in Sakir, but that year's Mercedes was by far the quickest car. It was a bit of a free hit, to be honest, because all the championships were decided by that point. It was almost an exhibition race because they were racing at a brand new circuit and it was a new driver in the car. That being said, he did deliver an outstanding performance. How he fares there on a regular basis in this year's regulation of car, time will tell. Ferrari, on the other hand, they retained their 2021 Giro of Leclerc and Sainz obviously upstaged his two-time race-winning teammate by pipping Leclerc to best of the rest in Abu Dhabi with that third place. If the Ferrari provides a competitive platform, the prancing horse might just get into its stride this year, and it'll be in very capable hands. On an individual level, both Charles and Carlos are ready for a full-on tilt at World Championship glory. But will they be fortunate enough to have the equipment to deliver it? So you've got two pairs of drivers, two massive teams who are going to want to win this thing. And don't discount Red Bull, but they've got a history of getting things wrong recently with regulation changes. Of course, the 2021 tweaks certainly pointed towards them, and they were always going to bring Red Bull slightly closer because it favoured the higher rate concept. Ferrari and Mercedes, I have a feeling about them. I can't pick between them. It's going to be absolutely fascinating to see how the four drivers interact, and don't discount, of course, Max Verstappen being involved at any point because he is, of course, the defending world champion. Talking of drivers world champions, let's move on to that next. And it has been so difficult for me to choose one. I had something written down and then I changed it and then I changed it again and then I changed it again. So, if you've got Mercedes or Ferrari potentially winning the Constructors Championship, you would then think that, logically, one of their drivers would become world champion. But, of course, Max could be right in the mix as well. But don't forget about the McLaren boys. If the McLaren is as good as it was last year, Lando could potentially be right up there, as could Daniel Ricciardo, a race winner, of course. There are so many ways in which this season could pan out, and this is all being recorded before any of the cars have been unveiled and any track testing has been conducted. So I could be declaring Mercedes and Ferraris as potential Constructors' Championships. They could rock up in Barcelona in a couple of weeks' time and be the slowest cars on the track. And maybe Bottas is onto a winner with Alfa Romeo. Who knows? But there are just some things that are a little bit too far-fetched. If you had to say a favourite for the World Championship, I would still say it's Lewis Hamilton, although Max Verstappen, as defending champion, would be a teeny tiny hair's breadth behind him in terms of the betting. But don't think that George Russell isn't going into this season thinking he can't challenge for that World Championship, as are Leclerc and Sainz. They'll want to be world champion as well. Ultimately, I'm finding it far too difficult to hang my hat on any one driver. So for now, I'm going to leave this question open-ended. Who my world champion will be, I will reveal that after pre-season testing. I'll hang my hat on somebody ahead of the Bahrain Grand Prix in March. Because at the moment, there are just far too many unknowns to make any kind of choice that just doesn't look like British bias or you're a Ferrari fanboy. There's just too many variables there. I'm going to wait and see on my Drivers' World Champion. So there you have my predictions for the 2022 Formula 1 season, except my Drivers' World Champion. I don't have really any idea who's going to be champion just yet. I'm going to wait and see, as I said, on that. That's the end of the episode. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching or listening. Remember to subscribe or follow wherever you consume the podcast. So on YouTube, which is at 5 Road Lights, or on Spreaker, or your favourite podcast platform. My name's Aaron, and this has been the 5 Road Lights. When the 5 Road Lights go out, I will see you next time. Enjoy the racing, everybody. Goodbye for now.